Dr. Besigye, thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for the steps that you took to get here. So I wanted to start by talking about the nature of the relationship between you and President Museveni. Some people have made allegations that it's actually a personal feud between the two of you that has manifested in these highly contested elections. What would you say to those people and to those allegations?
Well, first of all, propaganda is one of the constant features that we have to grapple with in this kind of a struggle. Trying to paint those who oppose the regime in the darkest kinds of colors possible and to whitewash the regime. And all regimes of this nature, regimes controlled by a few people, if a few people control the largest majority of people, that's one of the constant approaches. They spend hugely on propaganda. But it's not borne out by any kind of evidence, because part of that propaganda was actually based and even run on some forte kind of history that my wife had with General Museveni, because both of us were in the revolution that went wrong. And there was, speculation that my wife had a relationship with Museveni and that's what we are feuding over. Quite obviously wrong. And as I've said, not borne out by the facts, because many other people have left Museveni to do what I have been doing. They have not been treated in any different way from the way I have been treated. Very recently, in the last election, his immediate former prime minister, the Honorable Amama Mbabazi, disagreed with him, and became a candidate in that election. And he was treated horribly, just like we have been treated. Before that, his closest childhood friend, a gentleman called Elia Kategaya, had opposed the lifting of term limits, which was done earlier. This time they lifted the age limit, but prior to that, in 2005, they lifted the term limits. We had in our constitution a 2-term limit for presidency, so they lifted it. His childhood friend, who was also deputy prime minister, who had been minister of foreign affairs and so on, opposed that. He was promptly sacked and ostracized, and all kinds of similar things told about him, terrible stories that were told about him. So anybody who challenges the power meets the greatest wrath. Very lately, some young gentleman from the music world called Bobby Wine, who is now a member of parliament, until 2 years ago, he had nothing to do with politics. He only stood in a by-election to go to parliament. But quickly gained a lot of following within the young people. He too is charged, he was charged with illegal possession of guns. He's been tortured beyond belief and so on and so forth. So it has nothing to do with anything personal. It is definitely vicious protection of the power. And this is why I was saying, that it is better to live under patrimonial regime that has naturally evolved, because it evolves with checks and balances, it evolves with institutions that manage power. The trouble is that, all these people are just peasants who have now become kings. And so they will do anything and everything not to lose this kind of benefit, especially when the competencies within the population to challenge and to limit their power are not there at all. This is the problem that we are facing.
So you touched upon it then, but something you've said is a real problem in Uganda and in East Africa at large is the domination of society by a few small cliques.
Yeah.
How, if you were to be elected and to come into power, would you combat this more structural issue and avoid the same fate as Museveni with getting in and saying that he was going to? And then
yes, so that's why our primary focus is on conscientizing of people, empowering people with knowledge and information, so that and organizational competencies, so that they can demand accountability. The changes within the leadership must be driven by the population, not depend on the the goodwill of the leader to behave well or not to behave well. There must be inherent processes and mechanisms that will, ensure that a leader acts in a particular way, in an accountable way. Of course, it is also important, and that's why indeed there are campaigns, that people's track record is also assessed before they are given an opportunity to exercise power. If somebody has been a bully right from childhood and has never behaved in any accountable way at all, then it would be, and these are all campaign issues, then it would be dangerous to elect such a person. But over and above all that, I think there must be competencies within the governed to control those who are in leadership. And that is the biggest lacking area that we are trying to overcome, to empower citizens. And once it is achieved, once through this struggle, they know that they can subordinate those with guns, nobody will ever become, a dictator again. I sometimes indeed inform our people that it's not our tradition, even when somebody has been exposed as corrupt and all evidence is there, for them to say, I now resign, as opposed to what happens in democratic societies. If you have been exposed, you don't wait to be pushed, because you know that for sure is going to follow. So you do the necessary thing and you resign. In our case, they don't resign because they know that there are no competencies within the communities to actually push them. There is a very recent case. I'm not even aware of any other. There is a Chinese gentleman called Patrick Ho, who has been tried and sentenced in the United States by a federal court for bribing President Museveni. He was tried, all evidence laid out in an open court. He was convicted. He has been sentenced to 3 years in jail for bribing Museveni and his Minister of Foreign Affairs. But in Uganda, it's not even that seriously talked about, in spite of very glaring. Not only was the money given, but they are all, including films and so on, having delivered the bribe, showing him the oil fields that that he could access, and all these things, which is horrific, because it simply means that somebody is in office selling the country. But, it's not a big deal. And let me tell you, part of that is what I was talking about, the culture. The culture of exclusion, people being excluded, means they actually treat government as a foreign entity, because it was indeed a British government. Whoever steals from them and brings to them is a hero. Whoever steals from the government is a hero, because the government is not theirs. And so even these ministers and so on, when they steal, they go to the villages and donate to churches, donate to village charitable causes, and they are praised even when they know that the money that is coming was actually stolen from government. So this is the whole mindset that must change for people to now consider that government is their government. The resources are their resources. Their suffering is because those resources are not relating to their problems. And that's where the biggest work that we have, if we have to create change that lasts, that's where it is.
And you've talked about the disconnect between the politicians and the people, and that can be seen with women in Ugandan parliament, there's a higher percentage of women in Ugandan parliament than in the UK, and yet when women come to vote at the polls, they're intimidated, there's violence used against them. You've talked about why the disparity exists, but what can we do, what can Ugandans do to bridge that gap between politicians and people?
Unfortunately, it's the painstaking effort of transferring information and getting people to be differently aware, conscious. Because even when you talk about women in politics in Uganda, we have affirmative action seats, and which raise the numbers of women in elected positions, because every district of Uganda has to elect a woman member of parliament. And we now have nearly 150 districts. So, and then they are free to contest all the other constituencies with men. But what has that done? First of all, it has created these women seats as some kind of a ghetto. When a woman tries to stand in another seat, they say, no, you don't come here. You have your seats. And these seats now, the women who use them to be elected, of course, they become empowered by earning highly. Members of parliament are some of the most highly paid employees in Uganda. I get about $10,000 a month. When a teacher, a secondary school teacher, gets about $200 and so on. But these women, once they go and become empowered and they drive big vehicles and they have money, they make sure that affirmative action seat is theirs forever. So it's no longer affirmative action, it's just, we have the Speaker of Parliament of Uganda. Before she was a speaker, she was deputy speaker for 10 years. She is now speaker in the second term. She was a speaker for 5 years, this is the second term. Before she became deputy speaker, she was a minister in the government. She's a distinguished lawyer in her own right. She's still on affirmative action seat. She cannot contest on the ordinary seat. So unless the population down there, has the competence and, to challenge this, people will continue to take advantage of them. And your question was, how would I ensure? You can't tell, by the looks of people what they will do. I, wholly believed that Mr. Museveni meant what he said, until I saw him mutate into some different creature. So the guarantor must be in the competencies of our people.
And touching on some of his policies, Mr. Museveni's policies, in 2014 he signed a bill which basically meant that repeat homosexuals could be jailed for life. You were highly critical of this, and you were one of the only voices not from the LGBTQ community to be critical of that. Do you think that harmed your chances within your own country in the 2016 election?
No, I don't think so. Though, of course, again, the propaganda, is raved to try and, depict you as wanting to get children to be used for homosexual acts and so on and so forth, which is ridiculous because whether it's for homosexual or heterosexual acts, children are protected, must be protected. And if anybody, engages with them, it's already a capital offense, that is punishable. But again, you are dealing with sentiments, you are dealing with people that don't have all the information. And so propaganda, yes, is used, but to my knowledge, I don't think that because, frankly, we have been defeating Mr. Museveni. In the last election, we still have all the evidence to show that we defeated him. And that's why we set up what is called the People's Government. But, I was jailed even before the results were announced. And in our constitution, it's only a candidate that can petition against the results. Even if you are a party candidate, the party cannot petition. It has to be you personally to petition. And you can only petition within 10 days of the announcement of the results. And all evidence must be by affidavit. And the standard of proof is that you must show that not only were you cheated, but that the cheating was of a substantial manner. You must demonstrate all this in court. But the point is, even before the results came out, the loser imprisoned the winner. And
for 10 days.
Yes. Yeah. So the thing is that in spite of all their propaganda, the intimidation, the violation of rights and so on, they still lose. They actually lose elections. In the last election, we demanded that we should have an audit. We should have, since the constitutional means was obliterated by their wrongful acts of arresting me, and we went to court and proved that I was illegally detained, we said, let's have an audit. Let's bring our results, you bring yours, let's have international supervision, let's audit the results. They refused. When they charged me with treason, it was because I announced myself a winner. I went to court and told the court that it is true. I announced myself a winner. So let's hear the case, and I show you that I was indeed truly the winner. The case has not been heard up to now, from 2016.
So you told us about, just to finish, you told us about a saying, in the home of the brave, they are crying. I think it's fair to say that you have been quite brave over the last 20 years, that you have been contesting Mr. Museveni and standing up for some sort of democracy in Uganda. What keeps you going through all the persecution that you've received from that regime? And what has motivated you to carry on, even in sort of times of being imprisoned?
Well, I think part of it is what I talked about. The fact that at the beginning, I considered that I could have died. When I was in jail, first for having supported Mr. Museveni, who had gone to the bush, and I really nearly died. I was 24 years then. I was not married. I did not have children. Neither did I when I went to the war. But I felt very strongly that people should not live in situations like those, and that certainly those who come after me should have a better chance. But having so joined, there is a huge burden of colleagues that have paid huge sacrifices. Some are maimed, they are in wheelchairs, you meet them and they keep on saying, please, why did we get into all this situation? Keep on, Otherwise, we suffered in vain. We would have suffered in vain. And you feel the burden that, it's not just my own sacrifices, but the sacrifices of so many which are even more serious than mine that would go down the drain if we gave up. But, this question, of course, comes up many times. Let me tell you, I believe in God. And I think that there are many things that we sometimes do which we cannot really explain how or where we get the energy or stamina to continue doing. And I've passed through some very, very bleak moments that certainly I cannot explain how I was able to really go through. So I think there is also some kind of forces that I am not able to explain, but I believe there is also God's intervention in all this.
Thank you very much for answering my questions. I think we have time for some questions from the audience. So if anyone has one, just raise your hand. Can we go to the lady in the fourth row?
Thank you very much for that. I'm just wondering, in your perspective, what do you think that a challenge to the given system would look like, given the fact that clearly the current regime isn't going to budge and give in to the people's desires, but then any sort of revolt or coup would create long-term instability? So what would the ideal situation be right now?
Well, a coup not only would it create instability, it would recreate the same system. It would still be the guns that are in charge. So the struggle we are talking about is a struggle of unarmed people who organize to weaken those who are armed. And there are many ways in which it's done. It's a protracted kind of struggle. Let me tell you, for some years now, there were soldiers deployed around my house, full time, to stop me from going out, or if I go out, to go with their permission and follow me to see what I'm doing until I come back. But because in doing all the kinds of things they do to protect the regime, for the regime's survival, they actually don't have resources for people's survival. And these soldiers are part of those people. Their relatives have no medical care, they have no education, they have no jobs, they have no, it's the suffering permeates into the forces themselves. And so these fellows they bring to guard me, would be there, and from time to time I would come and talk to them because they have brought them to me there. And I, ask them how they live. And they tell me, we live terribly. And I say, so do you realize that actually what we are doing is to fight for you? You say, yes, we actually know, but orders are coming from above. You say, don't worry, you just tell your friends that this is your struggle. And after, and they stay there quite often without any food. Sometimes I would, go and buy some ripe bananas and distribute to them, and they are very happy. And after a few days, they are taken back to their barracks. They take the words also and tell them, this thing. And quite clearly, that I'm just talking about one incident, but many similar situations have led to the security forces themselves being some of our strongest supporters. In the last election, where soldiers voted, we won convincingly, and it has caused a lot of problems for the regime. Now they are trying to recruit a new force and to do all kinds of things. So it's a protracted struggle of weakening them while strengthening the population. And at some stage, the balance tilts. And when it tilts, the soldiers join the population. Quite often, they, just like you saw what happened in Sudan, they arrested Bashir, their master, and now charged him for killing the the protesters. And of course, there is still a lot of negotiation going on because the soldiers also wanted to now be the champions. But the people said, no, wait a moment. We didn't fight for you. We want to be in charge of this thing. So it's a process that leads to people eventually taking power and subordinating the guns. That's why I say once it happens, it's irreversible because they know how to do it. Whereas if there was a negotiated change of government, for example, a negotiation amongst elites, which can happen also. The elite groups can have a dialogue and negotiate, and one gets out and is given some comfort somewhere, and another group takes over. That group still will remain outside the control of the people and can reverse even the struggle that they had achieved. So ultimately, it is the question of building the competencies within the population. This is how all these democratic societies that you have here developed, negotiating with the sovereign and so on, and building institutions, the Magna Carta, and so on, until people assert their will.
You can take the question in the front row.
I'd just like to follow up on what you just said about the point of strengthening the community and building democratization within the country. I was wondering how you felt about the role of the international community, how that could impact the process of democratization in your country. And also, I was for instance thinking about how it was about 5 years ago or something where Uganda, someone from Uganda was president of the UN General Assembly, I think. Do you think approving of the legitimacy of the current government is helpful, or how should the international community respond to your situation, and how could it be helpful, or should it be actively helpful at all?
Yes, the international community can definitely be helpful, but quite often it isn't. In fact, quite often it's part of the problem rather than part of the solution, unfortunately. Because again, the international community is a community of nations that have interests. And quite often the interests of those nations, especially the powerful ones, are at variance. Quite often they are at variance with the interests of the weak communities in our nations. Because those countries, at any rate, are still interested in having an advantaged relationship with these countries. And so, yes, to some extent, they can indeed be a problem. But certainly the international community has a huge potential to be supportive of democratization processes. And that is because, you see, even as we struggle internally, it's a very difficult struggle because of all the levers being in the hands of the few. So the people are totally deprived of resources. We talk about even these opposition parties, but even because of that situation of terror in the country, nobody can write a check to an opposition group. It would be treason and there is a lot of, there are spies everywhere, and everybody is fearful. If you write a check, your business will be destroyed. If you have a job, you'll be sacked. So, just resources to do the minimum things I'm talking about, to maybe have means of communication. As I have told you, means of communication are not easy. For example, some of the ways we use now to communicate, and happily, there is a lot of advantages from new media. We can get memory cards, put our messages there, and circulate them in the villages because they can fit in these smallest phones, not the smartphones. They can go in any phone and people will listen and can congregate there. So when they chase me from the radio, I can send a memory card and it becomes a radio in a village or whatever. If you have a little more resources and you had maybe some smartphones around, you could actually do a lot. You can do online TV, you can do online, live broadcasts on Facebook and so on and so forth. But, the minimum resources to achieve some of these competencies are not available, or just to get some people to move from point A to point B. So, external people can be quite helpful in just providing small interventions that can make a hell lot of a difference. But even more importantly, just insisting on rights, because rights are universal. The UN has already a mandate to ensure that I have a freedom to move freely in my country, that I should not be, deprived of my work, that I should not be, just freedom. If the international community was able to put their foot down and say, respect the freedom, that would be enough. All the other things we would do, if we can cause a meeting to happen. In fact, just today, I saw, again, leaders of the party in which I come from, the party president, was obstructed from visiting a remote area in an island. And there were so many forces just to stop. So just freedom, just insisting on freedom. All this the international community could do, but regrettably they don't. And that is because of all other interests. Because in the United Nations, they want Uganda as a country to vote for them on this, on that, and they trade. That's how, in spite of all this, the foreign minister I talked about, whose briber has been convicted, was the president of the United Nations General Assembly only 2 years ago. And he became president of the United States, of the United Nations General Assembly, after he had been censured by the Ugandan parliament for corruption. Yes, he was nonetheless elected president of the United Nations. And sure enough, that's how he brought this briber. He brought him from the United Nations. I don't think that the international community can be relied on to really offer the kind of support that struggles like ours really do. Unless, of course, the dictatorship itself is very inept. Now, in our case, you must credit a person like General Museveni. He's very manipulative. He's alert, he's skilled in manipulation. He's not an Idi Amin who will just, bangle and make it easier for anybody to intervene.
I think that's all we have time for, but thank you so much. Can everyone join me in thanking Dr. Kiiza?